Clemson's Trevor Lawrence shines in his early pro day workout. EA announces the return of a college football video game, and I'll give you the top 10 non-conference games of the upcoming 2021 season. I'm Jay Smith, and this is After Further Review.
And now, after further review, a Clemson student's perspective on sports.
And a personal foul on number 99 of the defense. After he tackled the quarterback, he's giving them business down there. That's a 15-yard penalty.
Well, welcome in, everyone. I'm Jay Smith, and yes, this is After Further Review. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Season 6 of AFR. This is the Season 6 premiere. Hard to believe, really. Hard to believe that this is the 6th season of After Further Review, but I'm excited to kick it off. I know that there's been a little bit of a lull in episodes since the bowl season, but I'm excited to pick it back up again. I got a lot of fun stuff planned for the podcast this season. Going to bring some people on, some guests in the works of coordinating that right now. But there's a lot to talk about in today's episode, and we're going to start off with the big news today, depending on when you're listening to the podcast. But right now it's Friday, February 12th, and it was Trevor Lawrence's Pro Day showcase earlier this morning. And obviously it's a little bit of an earlier Pro Day than most. He originally had planned to do this, I think, on March 11th. He was going to have 2 months of training out in California, and then, he was going to come back March 11th and do a pro day. But he was talking to the ACC Network and ESPN2 earlier this morning after his 45-minute showcase, and talked about how he has a surgery, actually, that's, I think, supposed to happen tomorrow. He's going to undergo surgery to repair damage to the labrum on his left shoulder. I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but essentially it's his non-throwing shoulder. Doesn't appear to be too serious, but he wanted to be completely cleared before training camps open in July. And he threw about 40 passes in today's showcase, mostly from under center, through to guys that he's pretty familiar with, Cornell Powell, Sharon Peak, Caleb Scott, and Chris Finke, at the Clemson Indoor Practice Facility. And he did say after his showcase that he's expecting to start throwing 6 to 8 weeks after the surgery and should be fully cleared in 4 to 5 months. So some, people might say, well, that's cutting it kind of close to the start of the NFL season. But again, remember, as we just mentioned, the original plan for this showcase was going to be March 11th. So he's actually trying to get this in a little bit earlier. And I think that's a smart decision. I mean, listen, Trevor Lawrence had an amazing college career. We've spent a lot of time on this show, and you've probably heard, if you've paid attention to college football over the last 3 years, all of the stats and achievements that he's had while at his time at Clemson. And yes, I'm rocking my Clemson gear today because I think it's an exciting time, for not just Clemson fans, but fans of Trevor Lawrence. And I'm a fan of Trevor Lawrence. I saw a tweet earlier from Clemson's head SID, and he was basically just saying, listen, it was from Ross Taylor, and he just said it's hard to even describe the professionalism of what Trevor Lawrence brings, and what he's going to bring to his next team and the league and the community, and that he's a genuinely great dude. And that's all true. As someone who's been fortunate enough to have a few personal interactions with Trevor Lawrence, I can say that he's a genuine guy. Deshaun Watson was a genuine guy. A lot of the Clemson football players, James Skalski, these are guys that I've been fortunate enough to actually, I had class with a couple of them, and I can say from personal experience that James Skalski is a great individual. He's a great person. And he's also a great football player. So yeah, it's exciting if you're not just a Clemson fan or a Clemson alum, but also a college football fan, a Trevor Lawrence fan, and just seeing these guys succeed and what they're going to do at the next level is special. It really is special, and I'm certainly happy for Trevor. But yeah, he again, This pro day was a little under an hour. And Lawrence kind of displayed a little bit of his versatility. He had he threw a variety of passes, some rollouts. I think he ended on it was a 65-yard deep throw on a broken play where he scrambled before he launched the ball, and that actually drew a lot of praise on social media. I saw from not just the ESPN on-air crew, but a lot of the pundits out there. Todd McShay in particular was talking about not just that deep ball throw, but also Lawrence's ability to put the ball in the right spot in the red zone. And I think that's a key point, right? You can learn a lot about a quarterback's potential with how they perform in the red zone. Where do they put the ball? How efficient are they at throwing down there? Can they put the ball where only their receivers can get it? Those kinds of throws are really what's going to separate you from the rest of the pack, not just in college football, but in the NFL. And, listen, I get it. The deep balls, those bombs, the vertical throws, the accuracy, those are things that everyone loves to see. But there are certain elements that Trevor Lawrence brings to the table, specifically in the red zone, that I think really make him a standout player. And, you saw that with the NFL presence, right? I mean, you're seeing reports of 31 people from 17 NFL teams attended the workout, 3 from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, Coach Urban Meyer was there. He's now the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell and passing game coordinator for Jacksonville were all in attendance. One thing I did see that was kind of funny was that most of the NFL scouts were on the sideline of the practice facility, and Urban Meyer's out there in center field at the 50 talking to Dabo. So, I mean, we all kind of know where Trevor Lawrence is going to get drafted, where he's going to go number 1, be Clemson's first ever number 1 pick in the draft, and it's well-deserved. It's certainly well-deserved. But, I think for Dabo, this is just, he's always preached the process. He's always preached we had to build to get here, right? You start with the Tajh Boyds, and then you work your way up to Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. But listen, I mean, Jaguars, they own the top pick, and that NFL draft that's coming up on April, I think, 29th. You would expect the Jaguars to take Trevor Lawrence first overall. And it was interesting listening to Lawrence's presser kind of after the show day earlier, because we got to hear some of his opinions on what the differences between the college game and the NFL game will look like. And he said, a lot of it is that mental preparation and just making sure that you fully understand not just your playbook, but also what to expect from opposing defenses and how to call audibles. I mean, that's something that we don't see as much of, that command of the offense, right? It's the seeds are planted in college, and there's a few quarterbacks in college that can do it, but it's really refined in the NFL. And there's lots of great quarterbacks that have, understand how to command an offense and call those audibles, whether it's, Peyton Manning or Drew Brees or Brett Favre or any really of the great, Aaron Rodgers, any of the great elite quarterbacks. And so that's something that I think Trevor Lawrence touched on, which is that, he said, I love learning new parts of the game, and so learning a new system and how that pieces together. He's excited about whether it's just and he listed them, right? He said, and this is a direct quote, mentally, he said the biggest thing is just being mentally prepared, defensive recognition, and playbook. So those are the big 3, right? And I think that's I think that's important to remember, is Lawrence has got the physical skill set. I mean, we all know that. We all see that. But those other 3 things are part of that recipe for success, and he seems to get it earlier than most. And so I think that's why you're going to see Trevor Lawrence have success in the NFL. But yeah, overall, this is, again, a moment to celebrate. Not just for the Clemson fans, but also really for anyone who, enjoys college football and enjoys seeing guys succeed, realize their dreams. This kid's going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and he's going to have hopefully a very successful career. No big surprises out of this pro day. I mean, I haven't seen anything on Twitter. A couple people talking about the shoulder, and maybe that'll be an issue. But again, there was nothing that any of us saw today. If you watched the pro day, there was nothing we saw today that would indicate Trevor Lawrence not going number 1, and even though he's going to have the surgery tomorrow, he should be fully healthy by July for training camp. So don't see any issues. But again, an exciting time for Trevor Lawrence and for Clemson. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about EA. They have announced the return of the college football video game. That is possibly the most exciting news I've heard in a long time. I know many of you are excited for the return of that, and we will dive into that discussion next. Welcome back to the show. Again, you're listening to After Further Review. I'm Jay Smith. Appreciate you tuning in to the Season 6 premiere of AFR. And listen, I can't tell you how many hours I've put into NCAA 14. All right, if you're a college football fan, you've probably either played this game or you know someone who's played this game hundreds of hours because it's the last game that was released actually on previous gen consoles. I guess you could technically, we're in this weird period, right, where current gen is kind of this in between the PS4 and the PS5, or I don't even know what they're calling the Xbox. I'm a PlayStation guy, so I don't keep up with the Xbox naming system, how that works. But PS3 was the platform that NCAA 14 came out on. There were no NCAA football games on the PS4, which is our current gen. However, we got an announcement back at the beginning of February 2nd, that EA Sports is coming back to college football, which is huge. Now, their announcement indicated that this game would be released on, quote, next-gen consoles, which goes back to the previous point of we're currently kind of in the PS4 gen. That's our current gen, and the next gen is still technically the PS5 and the Xbox equivalent. So we're expecting that this game obviously won't be released this year. It could be 2022 or 2023 before it is released. And all they would really say is that there's no date on when the game will return, or even a date when the return will be announced. But the game will happen at some point. That's all we really got. It's something that Daryl Holt, EA Sports Vice President and General Manager, has talked to different reporters about. Is say, listen, I can't go outside with my EA, apparel on, and someone not come up to me and say, hey man, when you making a college football game again? And so obviously, listen, there's always been really, I think, two camps within the football video game world. There's been the NCAA camp, and there's been the Madden camp, okay? And you can make arguments about which one's better and pros and cons, and I'll just tell you this. I've played both. I grew up playing both. My first Madden game was Madden 2005. I had Ray Lewis on the cover. My first NCAA game was NCAA 2006, and that was Desmond Howard on the cover. So I've been playing these games for a long, long time, back to the PS2, but I always preferred NCAA. I just always did. I always preferred NCAA, and I don't know if that was because you got to be, your favorite school, and you got to, there was just so much depth to NCAA that I felt like Madden lacked. Now, the current state of Madden, for anyone who's played it in the last 4 or 5 years, knows that it's essentially their year-on-year development is minimal, and it's all really reliant now on microtransactions. And I got no love for EA But this was a nice announcement. This was a rare W for EA, with EA Sports announcing the return of a college football video game. I certainly hope we don't get a Madden-esque version of EA college football, because that, I believe, up to this point has been the announced, or the title that they're going to announce it as is EA Sports College Football. They are not going to keep the NCAA name, so that is going to be a change. But as far as we know, they're still working, EA Sports is still working with Collegiate Licensing Company, CLC, to make sure that it has the FBS schools, traditions, uniforms, playbooks, among other things, ready to go for the game. And again, over 100 teams will be in the game. I don't know if we'll see any FCS teams. That was a discussion for a long time back when NCAA was releasing yearly titles, was, hey, can we get support for FCS teams? And a lot of people actually would do that in the create a team. They would, because it was so open-ended. You would go into your create a team, and you would, if you wanted to do whatever FCS or D2 or D3 school you rooted for, you could do that. And in some games, if my memory's correct, you could actually take that team and insert it into like a kind of a custom season or custom like dynasty type mode. Because I know that in the later games like NCAA 14, you could actually change the conferences. You could totally realign conferences. You could move teams from, I actually was able to move Maryland out of the ACC and put them in the Big Ten, and then I was able to put, I think, who was it that joined the ACC not too long ago? Louisville or whoever. So like you could move teams around, right? You could put Texas A&M in the SEC. So it was really unique, and you could actually take your own creative team and stick it in there, which was really fun. Now, I don't know if we'll see that level of customization. Again, this is a super preliminary announcement. It's just basically saying, hey, guys, remember us? Oh, yeah, hey, we're going to make a game, but we don't know when, but we're going to do it. Now, has anyone who's paid attention to video games in the last few months probably knows about the CD Projekt Red blunder of Cyberpunk 2077, releasing the game before it was really finished, can have extremely damaging consequences for brand reputation, all of that. I mean, everything that CD Projekt Red had built up positive-wise after The Witcher has basically been destroyed. And again, I know that's a bit of a rabbit hole, and we're kind of getting off topic for a college football podcast, but the point is that recently within the video game world, there's been several companies that have really bit the dust hard by releasing extremely anticipated products before they were ready. Okay, this Cyberpunk 2077 was a massive hyped up game. This was equivalent to like a GTA 5 or a Red Dead Redemption 2, games that even people who don't play video games have probably at least heard of, and in terms of just notoriety. And the game was broken. I mean, Cyberpunk was so broken that Sony, who owns PlayStation, and Microsoft, who owns Xbox, actually issued players refunds. They took the games off the store. You couldn't download them, and issued players refunds because it was so broken. And that's not what we expect to see with EA Sports. Again, a bit of a rabbit hole, but essentially the point here is that I'd rather this game take an extra year and then get it right than get a piece of crap, okay? Because I've waited, what's it been, 7? Actually, NCAA 14 would have come out July of 2013, so it has been, in July of this year, it'll have been 8 years. Okay, I've waited 8 years for a new college football game. I can wait another one if you're going to give me a good product. And so that's what the expectation is, for me at least, is that, listen, EA didn't come out and say, hey guys, we're going to try and have this game ready by next Christmas. They said, no, we want to do a game. We need to figure out the licensing. We need to figure out what engine we want it to run on. It's going to be next gen. We know that, but we need to figure out a lot of these other issues before we can say definitively this is when the game is going to launch. And I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that approach because they're not making promises that they won't be able to keep, which is what we've seen other companies do. And then when games get either delayed or released with bugs and glitches, it just pisses people off. And in some cases, the games get pulled from the store. One of the other discussion points about this particular announcement was obviously how legally it'll work with likeness, and will players get paid for their likeness. And so far, EA Sports has announced that they're going to monitor that discussion, and they'll figure things out if they do change. I mean, obviously there's I think there's legislation out there right now that's being introduced to help players profit off their likeness. But as of right now, they've just said we're going to keep tabs on it. As things develop, we'll be ready. And actually a good point that EA Sports mentioned, right? That Daryl Holt, again, one of their vice president, general manager, he said, that's not really for us to decide. We just have to go with whatever the rules and regulations are. We have no influence. We have no, that's not really didn't concern us. We just need to make sure that we have all the licensing agreements in place and deliver a game that the college football fans would want to play, and an immersive experience, and the customization options and the pageantry that we saw in the OG games, and that's all really I think that the college football fans want. I mean, again, the bells and whistles are fantastic, but if you can just replicate the core experience that I got as a 10, 12-year-old playing NCAA, like $60 is nothing. $60 is nothing. It's seriously, like, that is going to be, you think it's hard to buy a PS5 or a new Xbox right now? Just wait till this game comes out. I mean, I would anticipate there being probably demand like they've never even seen for an EA Sports title. And like I said, they understand that there's a market for this game. They understand that people want, a college football video game. I think the integration with Madden that they used to do, where you could actually import NCAA players and rosters into Madden, was huge, and it helped kind of bridge that gap, like we talked about earlier, between the people in the NCAA camp and the Madden camp. Because there were some years where I'd pick up both because I wanted to be able to progress my player through both games. It was a really cool experience, and it's something that is, it's unique within the video game industry. I mean, they essentially were able to sell you two video games to accomplish one. Like, think about it, right? You're doing one thing with one character or player or avatar, or whatever, and you need two games to do it. And they sold it to you for basically $120, and every other game's charging you $60. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, really. And you don't need microtransactions within that, model. You just need to sell them two games. You need to create a way that you can't play NCAA without playing Madden. You can't play Madden without wanting to play NCAA. Like, if you create that link between those games, I think you're going to see, a positive trend towards Madden. I think Madden's reputation might get saved a little bit. They need to do some things within Madden. They need to tweak some of the gameplay mechanics, but there's still potential there. So much potential, and that's really what it boils down to with this announcement is, there's so much potential. We don't know what the final product will look like. We don't know when it'll be released. We don't know what's going to be in the game, but there's so much potential here. There's so much potential, and that's what gets me excited as a college football fan. So I'm excited about this announcement, and again, it's going to be at least a couple of years. Certainly is going to be next gen. So we'll have to see, and I'm sure there will be developments about this in the next months or a year or two, and we'll report on them when they come out. But all right, let's take one last break. When we come back, I'm going to give you the top 10 non-conference games of the upcoming 2021 season. That is next. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of this episode of After Further Review. Again, thanks so much for tuning into the Season 6 premiere of AFR. I'm Jay Smith, and it's time to talk some 2021 college football, specifically the best non-conference games of that upcoming 2021 season. And boy, are there some good ones. I mean, there are some really good non-conference games every single year. You got Army, Navy, you got Clemson, South Carolina, you got Florida, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Georgia. A lot of rivalries are in conference. Louisville and Kentucky, that's another one. A lot of ACC, SEC rivals. That's an interesting little nugget, is that there's a ton of these non-conference rivalries between ACC and SEC schools, and a lot of them share states, right? That's the case in South Carolina. It's the case in Georgia. It's the case in Kentucky. It's the case in Florida. I mean, that's a pretty unique thing. Listen, there are the recurring rivalry matchups that everybody looks forward to. And then there are like the once in a decade type matchups that you don't get to see very often, but man, are they interesting. And we're going to go through them right here. All right. These are my top 10 non-conference games of the 2021 college football season. Trying to decide, do I want to start at number 10 or do I want to start at number... Well, I think I'm going to start at number 10. I'm going to start at number 10, and we'll work our way up. All right, at number 10, I got Liberty at Ole Miss. Okay? Liberty at Ole Miss. And you might be thinking, oh, well, that's just because you go to Ole Miss and you're... Well, yes, but also, we all know who the head coach at Liberty is now, right? It's Hugh Freeze. And guess where Hugh Freeze coached before he coached at Liberty? Ole Miss. And this game on November 6th marks Hugh Freeze's return to Oxford as Liberty's head man. Listen, Liberty last year really impressed. They returned 21 of their 22 starters. So it's going to be a more experienced Flames team led by Malik Willis, their quarterback, who's an Auburn transfer. Really impressive stats out of him last year. And I am super pumped to see that offense, that Hugh Freeze offense, taking on Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral, the Ole Miss quarterback. Like, this is going to be 120 points scored in this game, man. Like, just grab your popcorn, sit back, and just watch touchdown. Because I can tell you right now, I watched every Ole Miss game last year. We don't have a defense. And DJ Durkin, our defensive coordinator, he's trying, right? And it may take a few years, but this is going to be an offensive game, okay? Liberty at Ole Miss is going to be an offensive game. It's going to be a hell of a game. I am psyched for this matchup. And I think even if you're not an Ole Miss fan and you have no allegiance to either of these teams, you're going to want to tune in. You're going to want to tune in to this game if you like offense and you like points. And I think, This should be a great matchup. So that's my number 10. At 9, I have Cincinnati at Notre Dame. This game is going to be played on October 2nd. Now, really interesting nugget about this matchup, it has been over a century since Cincinnati and Notre Dame have played. This is the first meeting between these two schools since the Fighting Irish beat the Bearcats 58-0 on October 20th, 1900. It's been 121 years. So it's been a little while. It's been a little while. And that actually was, and I'm going through some notes here, that game was 14 years prior to Cincinnati becoming the Bearcats and 27 years prior to Notre Dame becoming the Fighting Irish. So it's just Cincinnati versus Notre Dame. There was no Bearcats and there were no Fighting Irish. When the last time these two schools played each other, that's insane. That's insane. Now, look, talking about football related, why is this going to be a good game? Both these schools reached double-digit wins last season. Obviously Notre Dame didn't finish the season like they wanted to. I mean, they had the big win against Clemson in the middle of the season. Now, it was Clemson without Trevor Lawrence and some weapons, but it was still a win against the number one team. But their performance down the stretch and in the ACC championship, and then obviously the college football playoff, it just felt like more the same to Notre Dame, and Cincinnati had ample opportunity to beat Georgia, and I think it was the Peach Bowl? I think it was the Peach Bowl, I believe, because the game was in Georgia. Or it was in Atlanta, I think. I know Cincinnati played Georgia. I can't remember which New Year's Six game was, but I think it was the Peach Bowl. But Cincinnati was in that game, okay, till the very end. Possibly should have pulled it out. So you got to think that both these teams are looking to prove something, and it should be a good matchup. I'd imagine that both these teams will be ready to play this one, and so I think that's definitely one you want to tune into. Again, that game's going to be played October 2nd. All right, now we go to number 8 on the list. We got Notre Dame versus Wisconsin. And this game's going to be played in Chicago on September 25th. These two have actually played a little bit more often than Notre Dame and Cincinnati. There's been 16 prior meetings, including 10 from 1900 through 1936. They met 3 seasons in a row, actually, between 1942 and 1944, with the Irish ranked number 1 in those final 2 games. But they haven't played each other since '64. So it has been almost 60 years since these two schools have faced off. And now, Wisconsin's non-conference schedule isn't fantastic. They do host Army on October 16th. But I think this is a big game because we don't see Notre Dame play a lot of Big Ten schools, and I think they're a little bit more tied to that area of the country than they are the ACC. I think ACC, I'm thinking Carolinas and Georgia and Florida, and yeah, it does stretch all the way up there to Boston College, but Notre Dame being in Indiana and South Bend, right up there with Michigan, I feel like they're more of that Big Ten area of the country. So it'll be an exciting matchup, and I think one that's going to be worth tuning into. All right, at 7, we got Nebraska at Oklahoma. This game's going to be played on September 18th. Longtime rivals here from the Big 8 and the Big 12 days. First meeting between these two schools since 2010. Obviously, there's a lot of history between these two schools playing each other. You have the game of the century in 1971. You had number 1 undefeated Nebraska taking on undefeated number 2 Oklahoma. I mean, I know everybody likes to say that Alabama and LSU from, would that have been 2007? When it was number 1 versus number 2. I think it was 2007. But, they say that's the game of the century. Hey, this was the game of the century before most of us were around. No, it was 2011. It was 2011. The game that I'm thinking of. Yeah, it's not 2007. 2011 was number 1 and number 2, and LSU won that in overtime 9-6. It was all field goals, man. I remember watching that game. I mean, that back when the SEC had great defenses. Like, every team had a great defense in the SEC. Now that's no longer a thing. But, yeah, that was the 2011 game. There were 5 field goals kicked, and the final score was 9-6. Now, Alabama destroyed LSU in the national championship later that season, 21-0. But at the time, people said that this was the, quote, game of the century. Either way, this matchup between Nebraska and Oklahoma holds a lot of significance in that area of the country. It's a big-time matchup. It is a non-conference rivalry game, technically, with Nebraska being in the Big Ten and Oklahoma being in the Big 12. But you got to think, There's no love lost between these two schools' fan bases, so it should be a good one to watch. Okay, number 6, we got Auburn at Penn State. This game's scheduled for September 18th, and this is Auburn's first regular season game against a Big Ten team ever. Let me repeat that, okay? This is Auburn's first regular season game against a Big Ten team, home or away, ever. That's insane. Ever. And these two are going to play again in 2022. With that one going to be at Jordan-Hare. So Auburn and Penn State doing a home and home. And listen, Auburn obviously a team that I was high on last season. I thought Bo Nix as a sophomore was going to come in with more, with that experience, perform well. Quite the opposite happened. Auburn really had a pretty lackluster year. But you've got to think that, and listen, oh my God, Penn State, oh my goodness, 0-5 start, first team ranked in the top 10 of the AP poll to start 0-5 ever. You got to think they're wanting to rebound this year. So both of these schools have something to prove, and a win for either of them would springboard them kind of back into contention within their respective conferences. Now, they're not necessarily going to challenge the favorites of Alabama and Ohio State, but they may be more in that discussion. So I think this is going to be an interesting game to watch because both of these programs have been struggling, especially last year, and you got to think, this is a good opportunity for them to kind of to rebound. Let's see now. We got how many games we got left? Five games left. We're getting into our top 5. We got Iowa at Iowa State, scheduled for September 11th. Obviously, COVID canceled the 2020 matchup between these two schools. But listen, Iowa State, man, you can't sleep on it. All right, these two teams always seem to play down to the wire, no matter the national rankings or the teams are not ranked of either school. I mean, it's similar to what the Palmetto Bowl between Clemson and South Carolina used to be in the mid 2000s. Before we saw South Carolina rise to prominence under Spurrier and now Clemson under Dabo, is you had two teams that used to play, they were playing each other tight every year, but no one really cared outside of the regional area. But Iowa State's still a great game. Now the Cyclones have lost 5 in a row in this series, but they're coming off that 9-3 season. And Matt Austin, I want to say that's the head coach at Iowa State. I think it's Matt Austin. He is building a great program down there, and I think they are going. It's Matt Campbell. Excuse me, I apologize, Matt Campbell. And Matt Austin. That name I think stuck in my head because it's the name of a official, and I think Matt Austin is he's like one of those rules analysts now for a network. But Matt Austin, I think he was an SEC official for a long, long time. Either way, Matt Campbell's doing great things down there at Iowa State, and I think the Cyclones, even though they've dropped 5 in a row in this rivalry, they're wanting to right that wrong, and I think this might be the year that they finally get that win over Iowa again. With the game being at home for the Cyclones, you got to think they might be favored. All right, top 4, we go Oregon at Ohio State. This is an interesting matchup, also scheduled for September 11th. Some interesting nuggets about this series history. Ohio State's a perfect 9-0 against the Ducks all time, but these two teams have only met twice since the 1990s. OSU topped the Ducks in, the 2010 Rose Bowl, and then they won the first college football playoff national championship, obviously against Oregon, outscoring Heisman winner Marcus Mariota 42-20 back in 2015, thanks to Ezekiel Elliott putting up almost 250 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. So not a lot of recent history between these two schools, but still some good games within the series, even though none have gone Oregon's way. So you got to think that this will be a good one to watch. Definitely a unique matchup. Okay, we're in the top 3 now. All right, these are going to be some good ones. We got Louisiana at Texas. Now, you might be thinking, why should I care about this game that's scheduled for September 4th? Okay, this is a big matchup. This is going to be Texas with a new head coach and Steve Sarkisian, the former Alabama offensive coordinator, trying to return that team, that program, to the glory of the Vince Young days and the national championships and everything. The name of the head coach who's now at UNC, it's escaping me. I can't believe Mac Brown, that's his name. It was blanking on me. I for some reason couldn't remember his name. But either way, right, Sarkisian's trying to return Texas to prominence. The Raging Cajuns have proven to be a bit of a tricky matchup for a lot of Big 12 teams. They shocked Iowa State by 17 points last season. And, Iowa State ended up going 9-3 and winning the Fiesta Bowl, right? So Louisiana's beaten good football teams, and they finished 10-1 last year and earned a spot in the CFP Top 25, the final rankings. Do not sleep on the Raging Cajuns if you are Texas. This is it's a trap game because from a a perspective of what's the reputation of these schools, Texas has everything to lose. Louisiana has everything to gain, right? Because Texas has, in a lot of people's opinion, no business losing to a team like Louisiana. And Louisiana's over here saying, hey, man, listen, we've beaten teams in your conference before, good teams that were better than you. Don't sleep on us. So this is definitely going to be, I think, one of the better matchups of Sarkisian's first season at Texas to kind of see where he is, and where Texas ranks, not just within their conference, because this is a non-conference game, but really against college football as a whole. This will be a good game to watch. Louisiana, Texas is my number 3. All right, top 2 now. We've got Clemson versus Georgia, and this game's going to be played in Charlotte on September 4th. Obviously both of these teams have been up near the top of the polls the last few years. Two of the most successful programs really taking a crack at each other. We all remember the games in 2013 and 2014, the home and home, where Clemson and Georgia, I think they both opened the seasons for each other. I know the Clemson Georgia game at Death Valley was the opener. I'm not sure about the Georgia Clemson game in Athens. But you go back to the 1980s for some history between these two schools. In 1980, Georgia beat Clemson 20-16 en route to winning the national title game, and then the next season, Clemson beat Georgia 13-3 in September en route to winning the national title that year. Because again, Georgia's last national championship, 1980, and Clemson won in 1981. So these two schools have some history, recent and past. This is going to be a must-watch football game. Clemson, Georgia at number 2. And at number 1, the number 1 non-conference game of the year, Alabama taking on Miami in Atlanta, Saturday, September 4th. Now listen, the Crimson Tide have pretty much made a habit of winning big against non-conference opponents to start the season. Let's go back to 2012. Okay, let's get a little history lesson. 2012, Arlington, Texas, they beat number 8 Michigan 41-14. In 2013 in Atlanta, they defeated Virginia Tech 35-10. In 2014 in Atlanta, they defeated West Virginia 33-23. In 2015 in Arlington, Texas, they beat number 20 Wisconsin 35-17. In 2016 in Arlington, Texas, they beat number 20 USC 52-6. In 2017 in Atlanta, they beat number 3 Florida State 24-7. In 2018 in Orlando, they beat Louisville 51-14. And in 2019 in Atlanta, they beat Duke 42-3. So, you might be thinking, why would the Alabama-Miami game be the best non-conference game of this upcoming season? And listen, I'm not arguing that Alabama should be favored to win this game, and likely will. But there's a lot of intrigue between these two schools in this matchup, I think, because this is their first matchup since the 1993 Sugar Bowl. This is the first time that Alabama and Miami have played each other since 1993, and that was a win in the national title game, a 34-13 win over Miami, and Alabama ended up with being the national champions. So obviously, two of the most storied programs in college football. I mean, Alabama's right at the top, certainly. All you have to do is look at their trophy case. But Miami and the legacy of the U is up there as a blue blood. And I think that there's a gap right now between the programs. But we talked extensively last season about Miami and how close they are to really being back and what that looks like and how they actually can validate that in the eyes of most people that are not Miami fans. And I think performing well against, I just listed like Alabama's non-conference opponents to start the season back to 2012. None of them were close. They weren't even close. A couple were like 10 points, but that was it. If Miami plays this game pretty close, maybe like how Ole Miss played them last year, I think it'll look really good for the Hurricanes. But either way, again, the gap right now is substantial, and Miami's going to have to do a lot of work if they want to be able to compete against Alabama. That Clemson-Georgia game, though, man, I think that's going to be a great game. If Lawrence was in that game, I think I would have had it at 1, but I just don't know enough about DJ yet to really say that's going to be the best non-conference game of 2021. Either way, though, it's a great slate. There's going to be so many good games to watch, and I'm excited. Obviously, with Lawrence's pro day today, and Super Bowl last week, it feels good that things are back and we're rolling along, and Lord willing, we won't have any COVID cancellations this coming fall, and we can have a normal college football season. Not sure what the attendance is going to look like. Probably depends on what state you live in, but I'm excited nonetheless, and I think it's going to be an awesome season of college football, and I am pumped for it. But that's all the time we got for this edition of After Further Review. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. Super excited to premiere now Season 6 of AFR. Lots in store, lots of fun, exciting stuff coming up. Be sure to keep y'all in the loop. And if you're not already following the show on Instagram and Facebook, you can find us there at After Review Show. Welcome to follow us there. It's where I usually post most of the announcements relating to the show, whether it's new episodes or guests coming on or just random college football content. But again, appreciate the support and excited to be back for another season of After Further Review. We'll see you next week for another show. Till then, take care. I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.